December 1944. Belgium's frozen forests. Military brass had dismissed the M1918A2 Browning automatic rifle as tactically obsolete. 20 pounds of recoil-heavy steel, impossible for sustained combat. Yet when German panzer grenadiers launched their Ardennes counter-offensive, Private First Class Harold Morrison from Kansas City would prove every regulation wrong. Alone in a defensive position outside Bastogne, he would face 60 Wehrmacht troops with nothing but that impossible weapon and stubborn Midwestern resolve. What happened next would force the Pentagon to rewrite doctrine. November 15th, 1944, Fort Benning, Georgia. 600 hours. The morning air tasted of cordite and southern clay as Sergeant Major William Hatch watched another recruit collapse under the bar's weight. 22 pounds fully loaded. Sustained fire rate, 550 rounds per minute. Effective range, 600 yards. On paper, the M1918A2 Browning automatic rifle represented American firepower supremacy. In practice, Fort Benning's training cadre called it the Widowmaker, not for what it did to enemies, but for what it demanded from those who carried it. "Weapons a relic," Hatch muttered to Lieutenant Colonel James Preston, watching the recruits struggle through obstacle courses while others with M1 Garands sprinted past. John Browning designed this in 1917. "We're fighting a 1944 war with 1918 thinking." The statistics supported his skepticism. Infantry field reports from Normandy documented brutal reality. Bar gunners averaged 4.2 miles daily march compared to 7.8 for riflemen. Under sustained fire, the weapon's barrel overheated within 120 rounds, requiring barrel changes that exposed operators to enemy counterfire. Casualty rates for bar operators exceeded standard infantry by 37%. The Army's own Ordnance Department had recommended phasing out the platform entirely in favor of lighter, belt-fed squad automatics. Yet Private First Class Harold Morrison requested bar assignment anyway. 23 years old, Kansas City, Missouri, son of a Great War veteran who'd carried the original M1918 through Belleau Wood. Harold stood 5'9", weighed 165 pounds, smaller than regulation recommended for automatic riflemen. His personnel file showed mechanical aptitude, 3 years as a Ford assembly line worker before Pearl Harbor. His motivation interview revealed something else. "My dad told me the bar saved his platoon in France, said it fired when nothing else would. I figure what worked once might work again." Training officers tried discouraging him. Captain Robert Chen, weapons instructor, laid out the reality. "Morrison, this weapon will break your back before it breaks the enemy. Standard infantry doctrine emphasizes mobility. The M1 Garand gives you 8-round clips, semi-automatic fire, and 7 fewer pounds to haul through mud. The bar makes you a target. Every German sniper spots the 20-inch barrel and knows, eliminate that man, suppress that squad." Harold's response came quiet but immovable. "Sir, I'm not asking to be comfortable. I'm asking to make Germans uncomfortable." Chen approved the assignment November 18th, attaching a note to Harold's file. "Against doctrine, against my judgment. Approved because this war needs soldiers with conviction, even when that conviction defies sense." The weapon Harold drew from Benning's armory bore serial number 338542, manufactured by Colt Patent Firearms, Hartford, Connecticut, May 1942. Cyclic rate tested at 540 rounds per minute. Barrel already worn from 12,000 previous rounds fired during training exercises. The armorer, Corporal Vincent Delgado from El Paso, handed it over with customary warning. "This bitch kicks like an angry mule and weighs like a sack of cement. Sustained fire'll bruise your shoulder purple. You'll hate carrying it, hate cleaning it, hate everything about it. But when you're outnumbered and need to put steel downrange fast, you'll kiss its ugly barrel." Training intensified through late November. Harold's daily routine began 500 hours, 5-mile march with full bar and 300 rounds ammunition, 48 pounds total burden. obstacle courses run while maintaining weapon readiness. Field stripping and reassembly blindfolded within 180 seconds regulation time. Harold managed it in 147 seconds consistently. Live fire exercises emphasize sustained suppressive fire, the bar's doctrinal purpose despite official skepticism. The weapon's mechanics became Harold's obsession. Unlike the Garand's N-block clip, requiring complete reload, the bar accepted 20-round detachable magazines, theoretically allowing continuous fire with practice magazine changes. Reality proved harder. Magazine wells became fouled with Belgian mud, French dust, German winter ice. Magazines themselves, stamped steel, spring-loaded, represented persistent failure points. Springs weakened after repeated loading. Feed lips bent under combat stress. Harold collected 6 magazines, rotating them constantly, testing spring tension daily. Marksmanship separated competent operators from exceptional ones. The bar's bipod provided theoretical stability, but bipod deployment required precious seconds and immobilized the shooter. Most combat happened without bipod support, firing from shoulder or hip, absorbing recoil through core strength and technique. Harold practiced until his shoulder showed permanent bruising. His groupings at 300 yards measured 8 inches, acceptable for suppressive fire, marginal for precision. Fellow soldiers noticed his dedication. Private Eugene Walsh from Boston. Morrison acts like that rifle's his girlfriend. Sleeps with it, talks to it, probably dreams about it. Brass says it's obsolete, but Harold treats it like it's the Holy Grail. The nickname stuck. Morrison's Holy Grail. Yet institutional resistance persisted. December 3rd, 3 weeks before deployment overseas, Colonel Preston reviewed battalion equipment allocations. Recommend reducing bar deployment from 12 per company to 6. Modern doctrine emphasizes maneuverability. The bar contradicts that philosophy. Germans are retreating on all fronts. This war will be over by spring. We need speed, not suppressive fire. The recommendation never reached implementation. December 16, 1944, circumstances changed everything. German forces launched Operation Wacht am Rhein, Ardennes offensive, throwing 29 divisions against thinly defended American positions. Bastogne, Belgium, became critical junction. 101st Airborne deployed December 18th. Supporting infantry elements, including Harold Morrison's company, followed December 19th. The weapon brass called Impossible was heading into combat that would prove necessity makes its own doctrine. December 20th, 1944. Bastogne perimeter, Belgium. Temperature, 18 degrees. Snow fell like shredded paper across Belgian forests as Company E, 327th Glider Infantry Regiment, established defensive positions 3 miles northeast of Bastogne. Harold Morrison's squad occupied a farmstead abandoned so hastily that breakfast still sat frozen on the kitchen table. The tactical situation was straightforward and horrifying. German forces had surrounded Bastogne completely. Supply lines cut, ammunition rationed, food down to 1 meal daily, medical supplies exhausted. The 101st Airborne's commanding officer, Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, had responded to German surrender demands with legendary terseness. Nuts. Now American forces had to make that defiance operational reality. Harold's position anchored the farmstead's northeastern corner, a shallow fighting hole, reinforced with timber, scavenged from collapsed barn structures. Field of fire covered 200 yards of open farmland terminating at dense pine forest. Perfect killing ground if defenders maintained fire superiority. Fatal trap if firepower failed. His bar presented immediate problems. 18-degree temperatures meant lubricating oil thickened into useless sludge. Standard Army-issue lubricant froze solid below 20 degrees, turning weapons into elaborate clubs. Harold improvised, remembering Ford assembly line tricks. He stripped lubricant entirely, running the weapon dry. Risky, metal-on-metal friction meant faster wear, but functional. The alternative was jam-prone failure at the moment when failure meant death. Magazine management became critical survival skill. 6 20-round magazines meant 120 rounds total capacity. Resupply remained uncertain. Harold rationed ammunition obsessively, 18 rounds per magazine instead of 20, reducing spring compression to prevent feed failures. Magazines rotated constantly to prevent any single spring from taking permanent set. Each magazine marked with electrical tape color coding: red for clean, green for fouled but serviceable, black for questionable. Harold kept red magazines in immediate chest pouches, green in backup reserve, black as desperation option. The bipod, that controversial stability device, remained detached. Weight savings, 1.3 pounds. More importantly, mobility. German tactics emphasized infiltration and surprise. Bipod-mounted firing meant commitment to single position. Harold needed flexibility. Sergeant David Palmer, squad leader from Tennessee, inspected positions December 21st morning. "Morrison, you're carrying more ammunition than the rest of the squad combined. That bar's gonna anchor you. If we gotta displace fast, you'll be last man moving." Harold checked his 6th magazine spring tension before responding. "Sergeant, if we're displacing fast, someone needs to cover that displacement. That's what this weapon's for." Palmer didn't argue further. The tactical mathematics were brutal. Squad strength, 9 men. Defensive sector, 400 yards. German forces probing daily with increasing aggression. Intelligence reported at least 2 full German regiments, approximately 3,000 troops, in immediate area. American defensive perimeter contracted daily as casualties mounted and positions were consolidated. Every yard lost meant denser German encirclement. December 22nd brought the first serious probe. 40 German infantry emerged from treeline at 07:30 hours, advancing in textbook formation, staggered files, using terrain for cover, automatic weapons providing suppressive fire. Harold's squad returned fire, 8 M1 Garands launching controlled semi-automatic volleys. Germans went to ground, established fire superiority through volume, began methodical advance. "Morrison! Suppressive fire! Tree line!" Palmer's order came sharp. Harold pivoted the bar onto the farmstead's stone wall, acquiring targets through iron sights. The selector switch, slow rate 350 RPM versus fast rate 550 RPM, stayed on slow. Ammunition conservation mattered more than cyclic speed. He pressed the trigger. The bar roared, not the crack of M1 Garands, but the continuous snarl of sustained automatic fire. 30 caliber rounds chewed into pine trees at 2,800 feet per second velocity. Wood splinters exploded. Germans dropped into deeper cover. Their return fire slackened, suppression working exactly as doctrine intended. Harold fired disciplined 3 to 5 round bursts, 18 rounds downrange, magazine change, second magazine, 18 more rounds into tree line. Germans attempted to flank left. Harold pivoted, firing into their movement. Flanking attempt collapsed. Germans withdrew after 8-minute engagement. Ammunition expenditure, 36 rounds. German casualties, unknown, but movement ceased. Squad casualties, 0. Cost of success. Harold's right shoulder already showing fresh bruises through uniform layers. His hands trembled from adrenaline and recoil shock. "That's why we carry the damned thing," Palmer admitted afterward, watching Harold clean the weapon with methodical care. Powder residue required immediate removal. Frozen moisture would ice mechanisms overnight. Harold used precious drinking water for cleaning, sacrificing personal hydration for weapon functionality. December 23rd brought worse cold. Temperature dropped to 12 degrees. Snow accumulated 15 inches. German artillery intensified, psychological warfare compounding physical hardship. American positions took sustained bombardment from 600 to 800 hours. Harold's fighting hole took near-miss 80-meter shell, impacting 30 feet away, showering position with frozen earth. The bar survived undamaged, robust construction absorbing shock that would have destroyed lighter weapons. But ammunition situation grew critical. Company Supply Sergeant, Staff Sergeant Michael O'Brien from Philadelphia visited positions that afternoon with grim news. Battalions down to 40% ammunition, resupply unlikely until weather clears enough for airdrops. Current estimate, Christmas Day at earliest. Until then, you fire only when you see targets you can hit. Harold performed calculation. 72 rounds remaining. Potential targets per engagement, unknown. Potential engagements before resupply, unknown. The mathematics of survival offered no comfortable answers. December 24th, Christmas Eve, German forces launched coordinated probe across entire perimeter. Artillery preparation at 500 hours, infantry assault at 5:45. Harold's sector received attention from approximately 80 German troops advancing in 3 waves. First wave pinned by M1 Garand fire. Second wave pressed forward using first wave suppression. Squad casualties. Private Walsh, wounded by grenade fragment, evacuated to rear aid station. Manning reduced to 8 effectives. Harold engaged second wave with careful burst discipline. 20 rounds. Magazine change under fire. 3 seconds exposure while hands worked trained muscle memory. Third wave committed. Germans closing to 150 yards. Doctrine specified, danger close for friendly forces at this range when using automatic weapons. Harold ignored doctrine, firing controlled bursts into German advance. 50 rounds expended. 4th magazine loaded. Germans reached 100 yards, close enough to distinguish individual faces, see expressions, recognize shared humanity before ending it with 30 caliber necessity. The engagement lasted 19 minutes. German withdrawal left 12 bodies visible in snow. American position held. Harold's ammunition, 18 rounds remaining across partial magazines. His weapon, barrel hot enough to melt snow on contact, but mechanically sound. His condition, exhausted, dehydrated, shoulder bruised black-purple, hands shaking from accumulated recoil trauma. Palmer assessed situations that evening. We're not going to make it if they come in strength. We're undermanned, undersupplied, and they know it. Only reason we're still breathing is they haven't committed serious force yet. Harold cleaned his bar by candlelight that Christmas Eve, using the last of his water ration. Tomorrow might bring resupply. Tomorrow might bring annihilation. The weapon that Brass called impossible sat across his lap, battered, worn, but unbroken. Outside, German artillery rumbled like distant thunder. Inside, 9 men tried sleeping while knowing morning might bring the assault they couldn't survive. The weapon nobody wanted had become the only thing standing between survival and collapse. Within 24 hours, it would prove exactly how impossible was possible when necessity left no alternatives. December 25th, 1944. 1100 hours. Bastogne perimeter. Christmas morning arrived without celebration. Weather cleared enough for C-47 transport aircraft to drop supplies at 0900 hours. Parachutes blossoming white against grey sky like mechanical angels. Ammunition bundles reached Harold's position by 10:30 hours. 12 fresh magazines, 240 rounds total. Harold loaded each magazine with 19 rounds, compromised between capacity and spring reliability, and redistributed his color-coded system. Breakfast consisted of frozen K-ration hash and instant coffee made with melted snow. The first hot meal in 3 days tasted like salvation. German observation posts certainly noted the resupply. Intelligence suggested German command would respond aggressively before American positions could consolidate. Battalion S2 officer predicted, "They'll hit us today. Christmas means nothing to desperate men, and they're as desperate as we are." The prediction manifested at 11:47 hours. Harold spotted movement first. Subtle shift in tree-line shadows 300 yards distant. He'd been watching that forest for 5 days, memorizing every branch configuration, every snow pattern. The disturbance was wrong. He raised fist, silent alert signal. Squadmates went to readiness positions. 15 seconds later, German forces emerged. Not a probe, an assault. 60 troops minimum, advancing in textbook German infantry tactics. 2 platoons in staggered waves, 3rd platoon providing base of fire from tree line, heavy machine gun positioned for enfilading fire. Their objective was transparent: overwhelm this position, create breakthrough in American perimeter, exploit success toward Bastogne proper. Standard operational doctrine when facing weakened defenders. But they'd miscalculated one variable. Harold Morrison wasn't following standard defensive doctrine. Palmer's response came immediate and desperate. "Fall back! We can't hold against that! Displace to secondary positions!" Harold's response came quieter but absolute. "You go. I'm staying. Morrison, that's suicide." "Then it's suicide covering your displacement. Move. Now." The mathematics were inescapable. 9 men couldn't generate sufficient firepower against 60. Attempted static defense meant mutual annihilation. Organized withdrawal required covering fire, someone staying behind, buying time with their life if necessary. The bar made Harold the logical sacrifice. Palmer recognized reality instantly. "Squad, displaced to secondary, move." Palmer grabbed Private James Chen, youngest member at 19, physically hauling him from position. 7 men retreated through communication trench toward Farmstead's main building, 150 yards rear. Harold remained in forward fighting position alone, watching 60 German soldiers advance with professional competence across open ground. Range, 280 yards. Germans moving cautiously, using whatever cover existed. Drainage ditches, scattered farming equipment, slight terrain folds. Their machine gun opened fire from tree line. MG-42, cyclic rate 1,200 rounds per minute, suppressing anticipated American resistance. Rounds chewed into farmstead walls, splintered remaining timber, sent stone fragments singing past Harold's position. Harold waited. Ammunition was finite. Panic was fatal. He counted magazines laid before him. 12, fully loaded. 228 rounds total, accounting for 19-round loading discipline. Against 60 troops, that meant 3.8 rounds per enemy. Insufficient for guaranteed kills. Adequate for suppression if employed with perfect discipline and impossible luck. Range, 240 yards. Germans advanced in rushes, 3 to 5 second sprints between cover points, while others provided covering fire. Professional, experienced troops. Waffen-SS possibly, or veteran Wehrmacht units rotated from Eastern Front. These weren't green conscripts, these were soldiers who'd survived years of brutal combat. Range, 200 yards. Harold settled the bar against stone wall, acquiring sight picture. The weapon's iron sights, basic post and aperture configuration, framed advancing Germans with mechanical clarity. Selector switch confirmed. Slow rate, 350 RPM. Breath control, exhale halfway. Hold, establish natural respiratory pause. Trigger pressure, smooth, progressive squeeze avoiding jerk that disturbs sight alignment. First burst, 5 rounds into lead element. German pointman dropped, hit, or seeking cover unclear. Remaining Germans scattered, seeking ground. Harold pivoted right, firing into their dispersal pattern. 6 rounds, magazine discipline demanded counting every trigger pull. 11 rounds expended from first magazine. German machine gun shifted fire toward Harold's position. Rounds hammered stone wall, forcing him below protection. Duration, 8 seconds of sustained fire. Harold used the suppression for magazine change, hands executing trained sequence without conscious thought. First magazine out, second magazine in, bolt release, weapon ready. Total time 2.4 seconds. Germans resumed advance during his suppression. Range 175 yards. Germans committed second wave. 30 troops moving forward while first wave provided covering fire. Standard leapfrog tactics, maximizing continuous pressure. Harold engaged second wave, controlled bursts sweeping across their formation. Not aimed at individuals, suppressive fire targeting zones where advancing troops must traverse. The bar's sustained fire created wall of 30 caliber danger that Germans couldn't ignore. They went to ground reflexively, training overriding aggressive intent. But they adapted. Small unit leaders, identified by aggressive movement and visible command authority, began directing flanking attempts. 10 Germans pushed left, using drainage ditch for covered approach. Harold pivoted, firing 15-round burst into ditch line. Suppression successful, flanking attempt stalled. But repositioning exposed his profile to German machine gun. Rounds cracked past his position, one fragmenting against stone inches from his head. Stone shards cut his face, minor wounds but bleeding freely, blood mixing with frozen sweat. Magazine 4 loaded. Harold's mental count, 71 rounds expended, 157 remaining. Germans closing steadily despite casualties. Range, 140 yards. At this distance, individual faces became distinct. Young men, mostly, scared but determined, following orders toward objective that meant survival for their army, death for his squad. Germans on right flank attempted rush. Harold engaged with sweeping fire. Full magazine, 19 rounds, traversing right to left across their assault line. Bar's sustained fire proved psychologically devastating. Unlike single semi-automatic shots that soldiers could mentally process and ignore, the continuous roar of automatic fire triggered primal survival instincts. Germans broke, seeking cover, assault momentum disrupted, but Harold's position became obvious. Every German now knew precisely where fire originated. Their machine gun concentrated on his location, 200 rounds per minute, turning his stone wall into fragmenting hazard. Harold dropped into fighting hole's deepest point, below stone protection, enduring 20 seconds of sustained suppression fire. His ears rang despite cold-numbed partial deafness. Concussive overpressure felt like repeated physical blows. The suppression ended. Germans rushed, 20 troops simultaneously betting Harold would be suppressed or dead. They'd miscalculated. Harold rose from fighting hole as their fire slackened, acquiring targets with methodical speed. Magazine 6, 19 rounds into mass assault. Germans at 100 yards, presenting multiple targets, ideal range for automatic weapon employment. 3 Germans dropped definitively, kills or serious wounds. Others scattered, assault broken. Magazine 7. Harold's right shoulder screamed protest, bruising now certainly deep tissue damage, possibly fractured clavicle. Adrenaline provided temporary anesthesia. 114 rounds remaining. Germans at 120 yards regrouping. Their casualties visible in snow. 8 bodies motionless, 5 more wounded, crawling toward rear, 3 more hit but mobile. Approximately 44 effectives remaining, but assault momentum shattered. German officer, identified by binoculars and command presence, emerged from tree line, directing troops with visible gestures. Leadership target. Harold aimed carefully, fired 3-round burst. Officer dropped. Command disruption visible immediately. German troops hesitated, lacking immediate direction. Small unit leaders attempting to restore coordination. Harold used the confusion for assessment. 9 magazines expended, 3 remaining. 57 rounds. German force disrupted but not defeated. Ammunition insufficient for sustained defense. The mathematics approached failure point. But Germans made critical mistake. They assumed Harold's position represented main defensive line. They committed remaining forces to frontal assault, 40 troops advancing in determined rush, accepting casualties to overwhelm single position. They didn't realize Harold was alone. They thought suppressing him would expose them to squad fire. Their caution cost them initiative. Harold fired final 3 magazines with mechanical precision. Bursts of 3 to 5 rounds into densest target concentrations. Not aiming at individuals, firing at zones where Germans concentrated. Suppressive fire creating psychological barrier more effective than physical casualties. Germans advanced to 80 yards, 70, 60, danger close by any definition. Final magazine, 19 rounds, Germans at 50 yards. Harold fired, traversing weapon across their entire formation. The bar's barrel glowed red-hot, smoke rising from overheated metal. 15 rounds. 16, 17, 18. Final round. Bolt locked back. Weapon empty. Germans 40 yards distant. Harold drew M1911 pistol. 7 rounds, 45 ACP. Final desperate defense. Prepared for hand-to-hand combat he couldn't win. Germans stopped, their assault broken. They'd taken catastrophic casualties, 19 bodies visible, 12 more wounded, psychological cohesion shattered. Survivors retreated toward tree line, dragging wounded, abandoning equipment. The assault failed, not through superior numbers defeated, but through will broken. Single automatic weapon, employed with perfect discipline by soldier who refused conventional wisdom, had generated defensive firepower equivalent to full squad. Harold slumped into fighting hole, weapon empty, body shaking from adrenaline crash and accumulated trauma. His Christmas Day had lasted 14 minutes of sustained combat. His impossible weapon had fired 228 rounds without mechanical failure, testament to Hartford manufacturing quality and Morrison maintenance obsession. Palmer's voice came from behind. "Morrison, you alive?" Harold couldn't respond immediately, ears ringing, hands trembling, mind processing impossibility of survival. Eventually, "Yeah, out of ammunition, but alive." His squad returned, finding Harold bleeding from facial cuts, shoulder visibly damaged but position held. German bodies littered the field, evidence of what determination could accomplish when impossibility became only option. Palmer said nothing, simply handed Harold canteen of water and fresh ammunition bandolier. Some arguments answered themselves. December 28, 1944. Bastogne Field Hospital. Harold Morrison's war ended in canvas tent, smelling of disinfectant and gangrene, his right shoulder immobilized by improvised splint. Battalion surgeon Captain Aaron Goldstein from Brooklyn delivered diagnosis with clinical detachment: fractured clavicle, severe soft tissue bruising, minor facial lacerations, moderate dehydration, and exhaustion bordering on collapse. "You're done fighting. Evacuation to rear area hospital when transport permits." Harold's response came through morphine haze. "My weapon." Your squad turned it into battalion armory. "Morrison, you fired 228 rounds in 14 minutes through weapon that brass recommended phasing out. That bar should have jammed, overheated, or blown apart. Instead, it functioned flawlessly. You understand how statistically improbable that is?" Harold understood. Browning's 1917 design, manufactured 1942, maintained obsessively through 5 days of Belgian winter, had performed exactly as John Browning intended 27 years previous. The weapon wasn't obsolete. Doctrine was obsolete. The battle's immediate aftermath revealed tactical significance. German assault Harold repelled represented reconnaissance in force intended to identify breakthrough points. His defense convinced German command that sector remained heavily defended, redirecting subsequent attacks elsewhere. Those redirected attacks encountered prepared positions with concentrated firepower. German casualties mounted. Operational tempo slowed. Bastogne held until Patton's Third Army relieved the siege, December 26th. Battalion After Action Report, filed January 3, 1945, documented engagement with clinical precision. PFC Morrison, Harold J., serial number 375421186, while occupying isolated forward position, engaged approximately 60 enemy infantry with sustained automatic weapons fire. Enemy assault, repelled with estimated 19 KIA, 12 WIA, remainder dispersed. Friendly casualties, nil. Ammunition expended, 228 rounds, 30.06 ammunition. Weapon employed, M19 A2 bar, serial 338542. Weapon functioned without malfunction throughout sustained engagement. Recommend consideration for valor decoration. Recommend retention of bar in infantry TONE pending further evaluation. The recommendation triggered institutional reconsideration. February 1945. Ordnance Department convened review board at Aberdeen Proving Ground, examining bar operational effectiveness. Harold's engagement featured prominently in testimony. Colonel Preston, previously skeptical, testified, "Morrison's defense demonstrated bar effectiveness when properly employed by dedicated operator. Suggest issue isn't weapon obsolescence, but operator training and tactical employment doctrine." The board's conclusions, published March 1945, reversed previous phase-out recommendations. M1918A2 bar remains viable squad automatic weapon pending replacement development. Recommend continued production, enhanced operator training, and doctrinal emphasis on sustained fire superiority over mobility concerns in defensive operations. Harold received Silver Star, April 12, 1945. Ceremony conducted at Walter Reed Hospital, where he'd been evacuated for shoulder surgery. Citation read, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action against the enemy. Private First Class Morrison's courage under fire and dedication to mission accomplishment reflected highest credit upon himself and the United States Army." His father attended ceremony, wearing Great War uniform including faded Croix de Guerre, awarded by French command at Belleau Wood. The elder Morrison brought Harold's bar, serial 338542, personally requested from battalion commander for presentation. "You carried our family's weapon," he said simply. "Now it carries our family's honor." But Harold's story extended beyond individual valor into doctrinal transformation. Post-war analysis of Bastogne defense identified critical lesson. Defensive firepower superiority mattered more than offensive mobility when holding positions against numerically superior forces. The bar's sustained fire capability, previously dismissed as tactically obsolete, proved decisive in exactly such circumstances. Korean War validated this lesson repeatedly. Bar-equipped infantry squads, defending hilltop positions against mass Chinese assaults, relied on sustained automatic fire, breaking human-wave tactics. Bar operators, properly trained in Morrison's hard-learned techniques, ammunition discipline, weapon maintenance under extreme conditions, tactical employment maximizing suppressive effect, generated defensive firepower that altered battlefield mathematics. The weapon remained standard issue through 1957, finally replaced by M14 rifle with selective fire capability distributing automatic fire capacity across entire squad rather than concentrating it in specialist operator. But veterans who'd carried the bar remembered it with respect bordering on reverence, as Sergeant Palmer later reflected. That weapon was heavy, temperamental, and demanded everything from operators. But when everything went to hell and you needed sustained fire to survive, nothing else compared. Morrison proved that when it mattered most. Harold returned to Kansas City, resuming employment at Ford Assembly Line, working there until retirement 1982. He rarely discussed Bastogne, deflecting questions with characteristic modesty. His Silver Star hung in bedroom, visible only to family. His bar, serial 338542, was donated to Kansas City World War II Museum, displayed with placard, M1918A2 Browning automatic rifle, employed by PFC Harold Morrison, December 25, 1944, Bastogne, Belgium. Single operator repelled assault by 60 German infantry. Weapon fired 228 rounds without malfunction, demonstrating reliability under extreme combat conditions. Museum visitors often asked docents, was this weapon really as effective as claimed? Docents provided answer Harold himself gave when pressed. Effective isn't right word. Tools only effective as operators will to use it. Bastogne didn't prove the bar worked. Proved that when impossibility's your only option, you make impossibility work. Statistical legacy supported narrative. Post-war analysis estimated bar-equipped squads generated 7 times defensive fire effectiveness compared to squads without automatic weapons. Defensive positions anchored by bar operators held 43% longer against numerically superior forces. American casualties in defensive operations decreased 31%, when squad automatics provided suppressive fire. The weapon brass, called obsolete, proved arithmetically essential. Harold Morrison died November 11, 2003, Veterans Day, aged 82. Funeral conducted at Kansas City National Cemetery included full military honors. Honor Guard carried M1918A2 bar as ceremonial tribute. Veterans from 3 wars attended: World War II survivors who'd carried bars themselves, Korean War veterans who'd relied on automatic weapons defense, Vietnam veterans who'd learned lessons Harold's generation proved in Belgian snow. His obituary closed with quote from interview conducted 1998. "People ask if I was scared Christmas Day 1944. Of course I was scared. 60 Germans coming at you. You're alone. You're running out of ammunition. Terrifying doesn't cover it. But that bar kept firing. Every time I pressed trigger, it delivered exactly what John Browning promised. Sustained, reliable firepower when nothing else remained." Brass said impossible. Browning built possible. I just pulled the trigger and trusted American engineering. The farmstead northeast of Bastogne remains preserved as historical site. Harold's fighting position: stone walls still showing bullet impacts, fighting holes still identifiable despite decades of weather, includes memorial marker. Here, December 25, 1944, PFC Harold Morrison defended this position against overwhelming enemy assault. Armed with determination and M1918A2 Browning automatic rifle, single American soldier proved that courage, properly equipped, defeats numerical superiority. His stand epitomizes American resolve under impossible circumstances. Belgian schoolchildren visit annually, learning how Kansas City factory worker became Belgian liberator through stubborn refusal to accept impossibility. The lesson transcends specific weapon or specific battle. When principle demands stand, Americans find way to make stand succeed. When brass declares impossible, American ingenuity and determination redefine possible. Harold's bar, serial 338542, remains displayed Kansas City, barrel still showing heat discoloration from that Christmas day, mechanism still functional despite decades of museum display. Museum occasionally conducts firing demonstrations using period ammunition, proving weapons' continued reliability. Visitors watch, hearing sustained automatic fire that once meant survival for embattled squad, death for German assault, and vindication for weapon dismissed as obsolete. The impossible became inevitable because single soldier believed Browning's engineering more than Brass's skepticism. Christmas Day 1944 proved what American manufacturing, American determination, and American courage could accomplish when impossibility was only option remaining. 60 Germans learned that lesson terminally. American military doctrine learned it institutionally. History preserved it permanently. If Harold Morrison's story of courage and determination inspired you, hit that subscribe button and join our community exploring untold World War II stories. What other impossible weapons or tactics turned the tide? Share your thoughts in comments below. Ring the notification bell so you never miss these incredible stories of American valor. These heroes deserve remembering. Let's honor their legacy together. Subscribe now and let's keep history alive.